My name is Greg and I'm an alcoholic and an addict. My sobriety date is January 30th, 2018. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what my life was like before I got into recovery, what happened to get me into recovery, and what it's like now that I'm in recovery. I'll start at the beginning. I was born into a very good family, loving family. My mother and my sister. My father died when I was a month old from an overdose, so I never got the chance to meet him or know him. I'm going to go through it kind of quick. My first drunk was at 8 years old. My sister was having a party with her friends, and they thought it would be funny to get me drunk, so they made me chug a 40 ounce of malt liquor. I got wasted, and I absolutely loved what I felt. From that point forward, I drank to get drunk, from 8 on up, and it was something that got me out of reality. I didn't have to feel anything from getting bullied in school or being molested or anything like that. It all went out the window when I was drinking. So, drank for a while. When I was 11 years old, my mother came down with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. And with that comes a lot of pain medication. I had a friend come over after school one day, saw my mom's morphine bottle, proceeded to tell me what it was and what it would do to me. So we each took one, and the level of no reality skyrocketed from there. I became a full-blown pill addict at 11 years old. I had stole my mom's pills all the time, to one, get out of my reality, and two, to look cool in front of my friends. Fast forward 4 years, my mother ended up passing away from her illnesses, and my supply dried up. I will point out that while my mom was sick, all that I cared about was taking her pills and being with my friends or my girlfriend at that time. I was never home. I never helped out with my mother. And it was like she didn't have a son from that point on. So I cared more about getting drunk and high than I did about my mother, who was dying. So she passed away. I ended up getting turned on to heroin because I didn't have any pills, and it progressed from there. I ended up getting kicked out of the house that I was at. My stepdad kicked me out, and I ended up going off the rails. So I was in and out of homelessness, living on people's couches. I had my family take me in a couple of times and kick me out a couple of times. When I was 18, I ended up getting caught selling weed. I went to court and they told me that I had to go to rehab. So I did. I lasted about a month, I want to say, before I left. The whole time I was getting high. I ended up back out on the streets. I ended up, my aunt took me in for a while, and I could not stop stealing. I stole most of the money out of her bank account. I was stealing her and my uncle's pills, and they ended up telling me that I had to go to rehab, or I was going to be on the street. So I ended up going back to the same rehab, and I lasted about a month and a half that time, getting high the whole time I was in the program. So I ended up back on the streets. I was ripping and running. I had found some other substances at that point, and I was going harder than ever. Ended up sleeping in a spare bedroom at my friend's house, her and her husband's house, and they found out that I had gone to the hospital for withdrawing from heroin. and they told me that I either went to rehab or they were going to kick me out. So I ended up going back to the same place again. I lasted about, I want to say 3 months that time before I left, getting high and drunk the whole time and hiding it. So I ended up back out on the street, and I was taken in by a guy that I knew. He owned a landscaping business. I was sleeping in a tent in the woods at his property, and he ended up moving to North Carolina and asked me if I wanted to stay with him and his girlfriend. I accepted. Being an addict and an alcoholic, I don't know if y'all can relate, but we find what we are after no matter where we're at. So I was out in the country in North Carolina, ripping and running. I was a blackout drinker. I had met a girl while I was down there, and we would get drunk and high together all the time. But I'm going to get to my last night out, and then we'll get into the good stuff. I was up all night smoking some substances and drinking. I had ended up blacking out. And I remember coming to rocking back and forth in this girl's arms, and I was crying, and I was saying that I needed to go back to this particular rehab. And I immediately went back into a blackout, and I am almost positive that that was my higher power sending a spiritual experience my way. That put the thought in my head that I needed to do something different. So the night progressed, it turned into day. We were still drinking out at some guy's house. He had quite a few acres and a pond. I ended up in a blackout. I guess I punched the girl that I was with. And then I passed out on a bench. The guy that owned the house and the other guys that were there ended up tying me to that bench and throwing me in the pond trying to drown me. Luckily, they weren't too bright in how they tied me to it, and it was right by my hands, the knot was, and so I undid that, swam to the edge, and then ran back to the place that I was staying. And I ended up calling some people that I knew from the rehab. They said that they couldn't get me for 3 days, so I called a friend of mine in Norfolk, Virginia. She drove 3 hours to come and get me from North Carolina, and then took me about 5 hours up here to Richmond and dropped me off. And that was the first day that I felt some relief. That was my last drunk. That was on the 29th of January 2018. I came to this facility, and in this facility they introduced me to AA, and I really took hold of it and ran with it. I was in detox for about 7 days, and it was painful, and I never want to forget that pain. But when I got out of detox, I was going to classes, and I kept hearing people that were saying to get a sponsor, and that were telling me to get a home group and get into service and get a network going and really commit to this thing if I wanted to stay sober and save my own life. And so I did those things. I told you about the first 3 times that I came to this place because for me, I couldn't get and stay in recovery if I wasn't doing it for myself. I did it for the courts, I did it for the family, and I did it for friends, and it never worked out because I didn't want to get sober and I didn't want to live a life in recovery. So when the pain got great enough and my bottom got low enough and I was scared enough, I decided to make that leap and do something different. So I ended up getting a sponsor, and he started taking me through the steps. And I started to find out things about myself. I started to find out that I had a serious hatred for God. And I had insecurities, and I was scared, and I didn't know how to feel emotion, and I didn't know how to show emotion. and basic things that normal people, you know, have an understanding and a grasp of. And so I ended up getting a home group and reaching out to people in that home group to build my network. I called people just to say hello and tell them how I was feeling, and I really got to see how this program worked for me, and just doing everything different than I had my whole entire life. Um, I ended up really telling it all. My first sponsor told me that I should Dungeons and Dragons myself up a higher power. What he meant by that was to think about the qualities that I wanted my higher power to have. So I did that, and what that looked like and ended up being for me was the energy of the universe. You know, the energy of the universe is loves all and is healing and is peaceful. And I feel like that suited me best. You know, I've heard people in the program tell me and, you know, others when speaking that they have to believe in a certain God, and I just don't believe that. And if I did listen to that and I took that to heart, I wouldn't be in this program still. So I got to remember that it's okay that I believe in what I believe in. And you know, there are other people out there that do too. And if I can be that light that shows them that it's okay and that it does work, then so be it. So I got into service work. Like I said, I got a home group, and I started as an opener closer, and so I had to get there an hour early, and I had to set up chairs, and I got to greet people when they came in, and I made the coffee, and I got to break everything down at the end of the meeting, and it really gave me a sense of responsibility, which is something that I never had. I always used everything, used and abused everybody, all because I was all that mattered, and I was the one that should be getting everything handed to me. So it really got me outside of my square, and for that I'll be forever grateful. AA is definitely such a godsend, and it's, you know, it's been life changing. I met the woman of my dreams in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Something I'd always told myself I wouldn't do was get married, not because I didn't want to per se, but because I didn't think that anybody would want to marry me, I think was the real down and dirty of it. So, you know, I've been able to hold a relationship down for quite a few years now. We got married in May. Couldn't be happier. I have a job that I've worked at for a year consecutively. I pay bills. I pay rent. Things that I never did on the street. And, you know, it just makes me feel like a better person, and it makes me feel like I'm fulfilling my life, and I'm getting something out of it in return. So I love it. AA saved my life. My higher power saved my life. And, you know, recovery is the best place to be for me. It's not for everybody, but it is for me. And I love it. So I think I'll end on that. I will talk about the fifth step briefly, the fourth and the fifth, really. The fourth step is, you know, it's the step that I got to write things down and to really think about things that I had pushed out of my mind my whole drinking and drugging career. And putting those things down on paper was scary for sure, mainly because I thought that I had done worse than everybody else, and because I didn't want to open up those feelings anymore. But I said at the beginning that I would go to any length in order to get sober and maintain my sobriety, and so that's what I did. I poured my heart out. I ended up doing a fifth step, and it took 8 hours to go through my fourth, everything that I wrote down on that, and to get, feedback and learn what my character defects were. And when I told those things to my sponsor at the time, thinking that he was going to shun me and that he was going to laugh at me and that he was going to get up and walk out, and he just sat there and said that he had been through things like that, and that he had done worse, it really solidified the fact that I was in the right place and that I had found my new family. The fifth step for me is one of the most liberating things I've ever done in my life. It gave me freedom from self, worry, regret, grief, and it really just gave me a new love for myself, and it made it possible for me to begin to forgive myself for the things that I had done. I love the program of AA. I can't say it enough, and I am so happy that I was able to make it as far as I have. One day at a time I can do this thing, and God willing, I'll be able to live another day sober tomorrow. So I think that's all I got. I want to thank everybody for letting me share.